Hello SGD, this video will look at Machu Picchu and common comments and mentioned in videos like how did the Inca drag megaliths to the top of a steep mountain. So especially where Machu Picchu is located is essentially like in the Amazon, so trees, okay, but there we see a picture of a main portion of Machu Picchu, and the really important, like the most famous area is really this little piece here and or just out of view, but there's a we'll see those in a moment. So that's one of the views of the site. Here's another view, and so we're going to see this small area here and this small area here is where 90% of the fuss is based on, just to get an idea of the actual site itself. And so a little bit further up the river, off to the right, is Atlantean. You have a junction of the rivers here, so very similar to Atlantean, Sacsayhuaman. It makes a great fortress position, or at least a lookout position, but that's not the point. There's a lot more going on here. There's another angle of the site, and so how did they drag the megaliths up the sides of these mountains? Well, very simple answer is they didn't drag any stones up, megaliths or minor lifts. The site itself is a quarry. Brien Foerster is like the main offender. There are other ones now who have leaped ahead in popularity in recent years, but he is like one of the grandfathers, the elders of this Atlantis before the flood. The Inca could not have done this. The Inca and Peruvian, Andean people are clumsy and weak and have no problem solving abilities. They couldn't have done any of this work. Well, and he uses this term megalithic aspect. So it's a nice dress-up word. So they use the megalithic age, which doesn't. Apparently, this age is defined by moving large stones, and no one else has ever moved large stones. And anything that's large or well fitted must be megalithic in the era, which something Göbekli Tepe, Cataclysm 12,000 years ago. Just buzzwords, fuzz. It's to dress it up. They're masters of the narrative. They create a doubt, then they insert megalithic aspects and pre-cataclysm, this type of stuff. But anyway, where is the quarry? Here's a picture. This is the quarry. Notice very much I did a Sacsayhuaman one, a quarry site that they didn't dig a pit quarry like most people would imagine. And most people have always, not just the Inca, but other people, why dig a deep quarry when the stone is laying around on top and is at convenient sizes as well? So again, notice the so-called crude Inca work. Brien Foerster says that this is not tightly fitted, so therefore it's Inca, and anything that's tightly fitted must be this advanced civilization from 12,000 years ago. But you can notice just the natural way that this outcrop is ready to already be broken and fit together. Here's another picture. So we'll be coming back to this. Remember this building with a split there. It's one of the megalith aspects of the ancient culture that travelled the world and did all the grand building. Only they could fit stone, only they could move large blocks. But notice this block in itself, again, lends itself to being broken up and then used in these types of walls as well. Now also you could dress that up and make a polygonal wall out of it, but Machu Picchu doesn't really have. You have to go elsewhere to see truly polygonal work. Machu Picchu is really defined by four-sided blocks. There are a few examples out of that, but they're not this super complex. You have to go to Cusco and some other places for that. Just more like the stones just laying around, nice natural split, ready to go. So wooden wedges, whatever, you start cracking these big stones up. You can see it's already partially worked. Old picture Hiram Bingham. Now it's probably been cleaned up, but I'm guessing these would be some of the tools used. They had hematite. That's iron-rich. It's iron-rich. It's essentially iron in essence. If you bang hematite, it's very little, no difference really against using a steel tool. It just won't last as long, but it will last a very long time either way. Stones just all over the place, laying around, waiting to be quarried. Here's a nice piece. Now, because there was already a natural crack there, I'll put the links in the description if you're not familiar with the channel, but if you have like a sharp corner of any stone, but granite such as this, these corners you can take off massive amounts, or depending on how, or small amounts, just by tapping on it with a rock. So with the natural crack there, these could have been tapped out, opened up, and dressed up a little bit to get a wedge to slide in there and split that stone out. Notice there's these traces of those little wedge points already surviving in here, and I can't see it from, I haven't got any good angle, but I'd say that this stone was once up there and was wedged and broken out into a nice convenient slab. Was that done in Inca time, or did someone do that more recently? I can't tell, but with basic tools, this method is still used now with advanced advanced materials, and it works perfectly well with primitive, simple materials. Another picture of like the quarry is the site. So at some point it looked like that, and they had to make all these terraces, to make this place, they had to clean it up and move these stones. And it's not just in building the walls. Behind the terraces, they used these stones, like as in gravel, to reinforce those terrace walls. The magic of Machu Picchu is just like with the Inca, is the terraces, and it is the water, the irrigation and drainage, because these things would have gone down as a landslide in an earthquake, but they knew how to build. That's the genius of their work. They also were very good with it, and occasionally they said, let's go to the extra effort to make a really finely dressed wall. More examples of a stone that's laying around. The site is the quarry. Here we see an old pick. I think it was Hiram Bingham era, and I mentioned that building, it's got the subsidence in there. But again, notice, so the buildings and stuff in the background, if you get a modern picture, a lot of it's reconstruction work. Some of the walls do survive, of course, but there we get them. So this piece, we can see there. All right, there's another, there's the other side of the wall. Notice these big megaliths aren't joined together. They've got smaller blocks joining them in between. Is an older pick, and so I've got someone against it for size. Again, we'll notice that there's these little sort of lumpy bits sticking out, little bars popping out, but with the size, and if we go back, we can notice they're thin in comparison to the size, so it's the weight would drastically change. I'd estimate 16 tons, but let's say, not to be over conservative, let's say 22 tons. Put this link in the description. There's a compilation of people moving stones essentially with sticks and strings, not even compound pulleys, which you can make out of sticks and strings. You don't need advanced bearings and wheels and that type of stuff to do it. So literally you can see the people moving these stones, then the types of these stones are moving them with relative ease and on their first day. They haven't been practicing this for 3 months, 6 months, a year. Their father wasn't doing it like this and passing it on. And so untrained amateurs can do it. People who do it for a living would be a lot better. Then the standard, the other response would be, oh, lol, they only had stone tools and copper chisels, lol. I'll put a video all about that in there. I'll link that in the description as well. If you think that stone pounders, lol, or copper chisels, lol, what you're really saying is that steel tools is unfeasible, haven't been worked. And so all of the lovely buildings that have been built, 1900s, 1800s, even when steel was there, you're really, in essence, I'm going to put words into your mouth, but this is where the logic leads to. You're now saying they are all legacy inherited buildings, because a stone pounder is not a hammer, just like a steel hammer or a steel pick or a stone pick. This is a ridiculous point, and for lost ancient high technology people have weaponized this masterfully. If you have fallen for it, please watch the video. Show examples, just like with the lifting video. Show examples. They've conned you. and this, they've dumbed you down. Now, megaliths. Now, again, in this recent series looking at Peru especially, the Inca always incorporated natural bedrock into their buildings. They were unique in the way that they did that. So these, you might have seen, how did they move this giant block? They didn't. It's connected to the earth. This is another example. They celebrated, incorporated big giant stones, just like this as well. There's just a different angle of it too. Put that piece in there as well. So are there megaliths here? Well, if this might be considered a megalith, I know about 2 cubic meters, maybe 5 ton, something like that. Was it there? Was it dragged into place from somewhere else, partially finished? I don't know. But again, back to those other examples, you absolutely can move them, no doubt about it. So what is the actual size? This would also apply for Atlantean, Cusco, and for the upper levels of Sacsayhuaman as well. The standard stone is standard, what you'll see anywhere really in the world. A cubic foot, so 30 by 30 by 30 centimetres, is 170 pounds, 75 kilos. Any man could manipulate these without even a lever in there. We used to muck around as kids and do this type of stuff and move bigger blocks than that really easily. You also get a view of that from the side, so these stones again don't go all the way through. They tend to be interlocked, so they're even less weight than really be looking at 50, maybe 40 kilos. So what's it like, 80 to 100 pounds. So that's the standard size, and not just in Machu Picchu, pretty much everywhere. Occasionally you'll have a big lintel, but again, links at that video. Yeah, you can absolutely move and lift this with really basic stuff, and only one person would be enough to do it. Wally Wallington can do it 20 tons, so it's not a problem. Then we start to have some slightly larger stones, a cubic metre, so 3 by 3 by 3 by 3 by 3 by 3 1/3 by 3 1/3 by 3 1/3 feet, or a metre, would be about 2,700 kilos, which is basically double that to get the poundage. We'd be really looking at 1 ton, maybe 1.5, maybe in some cases going up to 2 tons with these stones. Again, can you do it? Not just an equation to say yes you can. There's examples of people absolutely moving these, and on the other side there's nice ground there, so this isn't on the side of a mountain. You could work from both sides as well. Now notice these stones are tapered, so even without the protrusions, the bosses or the nubs as they're called, you can get it up without getting the rope trapped underneath. You could do it with the rope underneath, and you have a lever in position when you drop it, and then you pop the lever out. But for that method, which I've shown, where people do much better complicated stonework than this or anything in Peru, those granite lighthouses, for instance, just not even in the same ballpark as what we've compared to these, but you move it, you lift it up, you test it. It's essentially a flat surface, so it's not complicated to do. Again, examples I've posted in videos of people doing much infinitely more complicated stone fitting together to this precision level, but genuine people might be curious. Well, because it's tapered, that gives you an advantage, and there's other ways to get around that, of course. But using that still shot from that video a little kid, literally a little kid, could move and manipulate this very easily. And so then people go, well, the lost high-tech people suddenly become uber skeptics, and they can spot every little problem, and then apparently no problem solving skills, but skeptic skills 1000% when it gets to anything actual information. So all of the chains underneath, again, these are not problems at all. Then we have larger stones such as this, which would never have to have been lifted. And if we go back a moment, I didn't mention possibly. So, for instance, these big pieces here, are they even moved? Maybe some of them have, but some of them, could very well be bedrock and, you know, attached to the ground in that way. But anyway, even if they weren't, again, absolutely not a problem. Again, these larger blocks tapered, that would be one easy way to move them without the nubs or the bosses. I hate the nubs that's come into it. It's protrusions or bosses, but that's be one example there. You could use a rope in such a way as that. If you had a boss on both sides, you get it from the corner, and it'll even be swinging from the corner, because if you want to bring this in and fit it and test it, well, you can't really have a rope there on the joint. So you have it swinging, and even though it's a heavy stone, because it's swinging, you can still move it around relatively easy. A few blokes would be able to manipulate that. If you've ever seen a big lift, you see people underneath with ropes, and they can swing and twist this giant weight around that's on the crane, because once it's swinging, you're only manipulating it, you're not lifting it. All right, now you have places such as the same area, but what I want to point out is these little faults, little lumps and bits in the stone, they're going to come in possibly useful as well. So one of the reasons why they wouldn't be totally finished. And notice as well that shapes. I lean towards these actually sort of being bedrock. Some of the other ones probably moved, but because of the shape of there on the ground. But it's these little bits running off. Well, they're going to come in very helpful, and it's very common to see those still in position as well. So these little faults that are still there, well, they can be used to your advantage, because if you don't have a nub on the other side and you want to do something like that on the corner, as long as you got a little divot, just a little position where you can put a wedge in there, and then especially use a double wedge, because if a rope's going to pull up, it's going to pull the wedge up with it. But if you have a double wedge, even if it slides up, the main one's going to stay there. Lock it in nicely so you have a temporary nub protrusion, and you can move and manipulate those stones. This one's like, see, you got the knob, and that's not a problem. I was able to get a look from the other side, and again, you have these little divots in there, but this stone, you got a knob, and that's been broken off or on its way to being removed. Get a trace of it there, but you have this hitching post. The megalith builders never, at least in Machu Picchu or Atlantean, they didn't build a ceiling. What they did was, you have these all over, and they would tie this is to tie a wooden thatched roof onto the structure. So before the flood, and this same method is used in Incan for crude Incan architecture as well. This is just, they've gone the extra length to fit the stones, make it really nice. It's in a prominent position as well. It's like it's a show-off piece. Now from that other side, I was able to get a photo, to find it on the Google Street View, and it has, there's no little lumps or protrusions, whatever there. However, they may have been knocked off, because we can see in places where these have been partially worked down. Now, for instance, this stone on the other side, you get a trace of it here, but I have a better photo in a second. I've got to remember, I'll put the link to David Morley. He posted these as a Google Drive photos as well. Notice again, that's for tying down the roof, and you do have that lump there, because this guy's blocking the picture, so I couldn't see, but maybe that stone had been dressed. So you see that they're being partially removed. This one hasn't been entirely removed or got broken, but what we do have is better examples of partially finished stones. Gives you an idea of how they worked, and what was their method that they did this. And one of the reasons was, well, again, because you can move it, manipulate it. Brien Foerster's argument is, well, this crude architecture, building is right next to the very nicely fitted stone, therefore they must be a separate, different culture. Well, I could go to a car park and see a dodgy old Fiat and a Ferrari and say, well, these are two separate cultures, must be separated. The advanced Ferrari must be from a different period, whether it's backwards or forwards in time. I could go to any suburb or town, and you'll see the dodgy old house and the expensive house. This argument that quality is just ridiculous. You can go, like, I'll go to George Street, I can sit you in a particular corner, I can see, look, 5 different civilizations have built Sydney, because we see 5 different styles and qualities of architecture. It's a dodgy argument, and that's their best. That's like the core. It's not like if it was part of a larger argument, then it would have some weight, but that's like the argument, and it has no weight. Brien Foerster again, so where you have those nicely polygonal stones, that they were existing there. The pathetic, useless Inca come along and built their crude work later on this site. They just rediscovered and repurposed all of his stuff. Him and just that lost, they really, really think low of human beings in general. Unless, of course, you're from some parts, and then there's no question that, it's anyway. All right. So there you see the roof part, the crude Inca work above the finer stone. So this is the pre-flood, according to the Atlanteans, whatever it is. And you see the looser stuff above. Here's an interesting fact about those polygonal walls. They're not joined by mortar. They're held together. They're held down by gravity. They're great when an earthquake happens because of the shape. They fall back into place. So normal rectangular blocks will slide around, and when the earthquake stops, well, that's where the blocks stop. Because these polygonal walls have these shape, they bring themselves back together. So if they're out of sync, all the other ones are going to push and they're going to go back down. But they are absolutely useless walls if you push them from the side. They're not mortared down, they're not pinned down, there's not a big bar running through them. If you just push from the side, they're going to fall over. So why do the people in Machu Picchu always have this rough stone above? Because of the high winds of the area. They had thatched roofs and well, where's it going to, like, firstly, why go to all this effort to do a polygonal wall when there's a chance, these would have to be rebuilt. They're going to fall down, not every storm, but more often, because the way that they built was just different, and it was not as, let's say, it's not as good to withstand, great for earthquakes, not so good with other features as well. There's, thatched roofs, all right. But, what's this? Crude Inca work underneath. So the Inca must have travelled back in time, left this there, and then the master builders pre-Cataclysm come along and then built this section, and then the Inca travelled forward back in time to build that section above. All right, because, well, look what this advanced, look, here's, these poor, slow-witted Inca that can't lift, can't do anything. So there's his wall underneath, and then, look, he must be a time traveller too, because we see the work above. This is something that they always use this argument, Brien Foerster especially, and then they won't show you the examples when you see this type of stone underneath. This serves a good purpose, actually, and trenches, for instance, at Machu Picchu have been done, where you see this cruder work underneath, because it helps to roll and move when there are earthquakes. So even where there's that masterwork, well, if you dig down enough, you will find this, and in some cases, like with a street, it's been dropped off and it's been exposed instead of when it was a little bit higher. All right, this is the beauty of Machu Picchu. It is all of a crude Inca work and the terraces in there, and beautiful dry stone. For any other part of the world, it's dry stone walls, nice looking, but for the lost high techies, it's crude Inca work. And then every once in a while amongst there, you see nicer detailed work, but a tiny fraction of the overall. And there's a nicer view of it, and there's been shifting and movement in there. The master builders couldn't manage subsidence, apparently. All this so-called crude Inca work is what makes this place tick. So here and there, beautiful, nicely fitted stone, but again, this is four-sided stone. The size of a stone is just not spectacular at all, not even remotely. It's just normal. But the real magic of it is the crude Inca management of water that goes in there. This place is not collapsed with a landslide, because they know how to manage. And there actually is evidence where the terraces have collapsed, and then they've mastered it. But this is the skill and the genius of it. But they just point their cameras at a few little places and then say, oh, but then look at the crude stuff next to it. Yeah, it's a silly argument. If it was part of a larger argument, it would like be one point to the larger argument. But that's all that they have is, all right. But the crude, so-called crude Inca work, it dominates a place with a large stone. So apparently the Inca couldn't lift heavy stones, except for when the wall isn't that nice, and then they could lift heavy stones there. Brien Foerster is absolutely, and the whole lot, it's just logically inconsistent. They've got a narrative that they want to get. And let's be frank, okay, the stone is not the point, the stone is the bait. So they look at the stone and they say, oh, but this you can't do, this can't be, you can't cut with, oh, you can't do, therefore lost ancient high technology, therefore this lost civilization, the golden age. They use stone as bait to get you onto their spiritualism and their quasi-New Age religion. Look at even the recent Graham Hancock lectures, it's all this. The world is crumbling, and the ancients had telepathic spirituality. Literally, that's the premise of Graham Hancock's new book, and it's the undercurrent which runs all of it. So whether it's not aliens, it's these superhumans of the past had these skills, and they used telekinesis to lift the stones into position. Take ayahuasca. This is what they're pushing. You see at the beginning of their talks and lectures, we're going to save humanity and bring back the golden age. It's copy-paste cult religion stuff. So this megalithic aspects thing, these are just rubbish made-up words, like the megalithic era, megalithic aspects. So it's when there's not a giant stone, this is megalithic aspects. What is useless, pointless words. I'll link these in the description. Look, Brien Foerster, if he is not an outright deliberate con man, he is absolutely clueless then. So he's, after all these years, he's absolutely useless in understanding any stonework technique or describing any art, understanding how any of it works. He's utterly, that's the best you can say about him if he's not an absolute deliberate con man. All right, and I'll put this link as well because he is, like as a tour guide, if you're going for laughs and for lols and you want to have it, you're probably underpaying because the entertainment value for this guy might be worth 10 times. But if you're going to actually learn anything or to actually look at anything properly as an adult, non-delusional adult, this guy is just the worst. He really is. So and I'm just using him because there's a whole industry based around him, but that Hidden Inca tours and the stuff they deliberately don't show you. I did some ones like, for instance, Atlantean, how did they move the megaliths? There's a giant ramp there. Brien Foerster carefully edits it out of his videos as well. I'm positive that they do this deliberately, that it's part of a scam. And alrighty. So Machu Picchu, the water, the terracing, the crude Inca work is what makes this thing true. Makes it tick every once in a while. They've put the money and the effort into nicely fitting stones. Even the best that I mentioned earlier, the best complex, rare examples of multi-faced Peruvian Incan stone is insignificant to the granite lighthouses that were built in the late 1700s and 1800s before advanced machinery, CNC and advanced technology. Skilled stonemasons and designers. Inca, beautiful. Look, I'm not taking anything away from them, but the lost high-tech people use this as an input. No one can replicate this. That is absolute nonsense, not even remotely true. And the fact is they know that now. If they didn't know it before, they know it now. I'll link those as well. I'll show you stone fitting that just makes this like so what really in the overall scale, and they'll be linked in the description as well. I bring the receipts. That's one thing I bring my receipts. So well, the only receipts that the Lost High Tech people get is for their overpriced tours and books. With that, SGD, cheers and have a good one.